Hi, everyone. Welcome to Happy to See Me, the podcast that puts the spotlight on the overlooked and underestimated. I'm Erika Casupanan, and this week we are speaking to astrologer Sarah Goldsmith. But first, I love to start each episode by talking about something I was happy to see this week. And just a few days ago, I did my annual tradition with one of my friends, Emma, where we went to get a Christmas tree. So we go to this town called Hockley Valley Farm. It's about an hour and a half outside of Toronto. And for the last few years, we have made this day trip to find Emma a Christmas tree. Emma's a big Christmas person. She has room in her home for a Christmas tree. I am just happy to go along for the ride. And it's really been something that we look forward to every year. We love going to a town nearby and stopping for lunch. And this year, I met some really sweet Survivor fans at the restaurant. So if you're listening, hello, thank you for being so sweet to me. We go shopping on the main strip, and then we go to the farm. And it's one of those farms where you actually get a saw and you pick out a tree and you saw down the tree yourself. And for me, as someone who lives downtown in a city, a saw is a big novelty. Also, there are these benches in this town that are shaped like polar bears. The first year we visited, we actually had another friend with us. So me and this other friend took a photo on this bench. But then now she has unfortunately moved out of the country. So every year we take a photo of me by myself on this bear bench looking sad. And it's really become this annual tradition for us. And I think it's so beautiful that this is a tradition that started when I was in my 30s. I feel like I see on social media a lot people talking about how they have a hard time making friends or feeling insecure because they don't have big friend groups. And I totally hear you. And I hope that this story can be proof that there are friendships out there and there are traditions out there that are yet to be seen. Even in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, there's still so much more friendship possibility. There's still so many new traditions to start. I'm so fortunate that my friend Emma and I have this tradition. And I hope that everybody knows that they can still start traditions too. It could be with friends, family, in a relationship, by yourself. There's still so many more traditions to be had. So what I was happy to see this week is the tradition of getting a Christmas tree. Also, what I'm happy to see this week is this interview with astrologer Sarah Goldsmith. Sarah is an astrologer and a tarot card reader. And as a spiritual practitioner, her goal is to empower people to overcome their personal obstacles and build a sense of self-trust. And this is an extra special episode for me because Sarah is actually my personal astrologer. I get a reading from her every year. So I know her and I trust her, and she knows me and my astrology pretty well. In this episode, we're talking about astrology and how it relates to being underestimated. So Sarah talks about how your astrology can help you to understand where you have issues with authority, where you might feel anxiety, and how you can use astrology to help you to feel more confident. So if you know somebody who is an astrology fan and maybe they want to learn to be more confident, make sure you share this episode with them. So why don't we just get into it? Here is my interview with Sarah Goldsmith. I hope you enjoy it. So folks, this is a special moment because I'm sharing somebody with you who is from my life. Sarah is actually my own personal astrologer, and she's been giving me astrology readings over the last few years now, right?
Yeah, like since pre-Survivor.
So has my Survivor life been a surprise to you based on what you were seeing in my astrology?
Well, I remember the phone call. I remember it very clearly. I think you came to me for a birthday reading, and I threw some tarot in there, and I was like, this is going to be like the best year ever. Like, what's going on? And I was like, oh my God, I'm giving her such positive information. Like, what if I'm wrong? I was so terrified that I was going to be wrong. Then the news came out that you were on Survivor. And I remember chatting with Crystal.
And Crystal's my sister.
Yeah. And I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. This is like related to Erika's reading. Actually, that was when I called you both at the same time because I was freaking out.
Yeah.
And then you won. And then for me, it was very affirming to me that I was like, oh, I gave this person such positive information and it occurs. So you are also part of my personal journey of success. You are my first celebrity client and, no big deal.
Stop. Okay. Celebrity. Thank you.
In my eyes, always.
Thank you, Sarah. I remember, was I telling you directly or was I telling my sister that when I was exiled, it was a full moon? And then
Yeah.
you were able to look up the date of the full moon, and then you figured out when the show ended. You were like, oh my God, I have figured out what's going to happen. And I didn't spoil anything. It's just based on astrology.
I remember that. Yeah, it was like in our Instagram DMs, like, I just watched you on Exile Island, sussed out the information, and then I was like, according to this, though, even more positive that she won. Because I didn't know anything. So yeah, it's my favorite Survivor season, not just because of you, but because emotionally watching it, I was so invested because of this astrology. They should release, for the astrology fans who watch Survivor too, they should release the dates so we can like investigate on the side.
Yeah.
It's like a different version of live tweeting, but like live astrology interpretation while the show plays.
Oh my God, that's so funny. Okay, well, Sarah, welcome to the podcast. So it's been established you have been doing astrology for a few years. You have been correct in your predictions when it came to me and Survivor, and you have helped me out in my life. I'm so happy to have you on the show.
I'm so happy to be here.
On this show, I usually talk to people who have been overlooked or underestimated. So have you ever felt underestimated?
Yes. I mean, as an astrologer, I feel like every woman has been underestimated in their life. That goes without saying. But then when I come in with this, because I just live astrology in my daily life. So no matter where I am, I tend to talk about it. And sometimes you can see it in people's eyes where they're like, oh, she's one of those basic white girls who just read something and is running with it. And so people are surprised when I actually hit them with personal experience, with historical research, and where it comes from, the origins of astrology and the validity that it has shown throughout history and how it relates to philosophy. Earlier, because I've been practicing astrology for 8 years. So earlier, when I was in my early 20s too, I would just let that slide. And then I was like, oh my God, should I stop talking about astrology? And then I was like, no, I'm going to talk more about astrology because I don't like that people took an interest of mine and made it something that made me worth underestimating more, or because it's kind of like having an interest or a passion that made people think that you were not as knowledgeable about life or were like living in fantasy land. As it relates to astrology, definitely experienced being underestimated there. And it's something that I regularly, even today, I was talking to 2 gentlemen at my full-time work and I was just going with it. I was like, I'm just going to talk and see if they are open-minded and understanding, or are they going to hit me with something? And in this instance, they didn't. They were so open to talking to me. But yeah, it's something I suss out on the daily, is if people are going to still underestimate me or not when I bring it up.
For some reason, people love to make other people's interests seem like they're juvenile or there's no credibility to it. Do you find now that you want to be able to win somebody over if they're a skeptic, or if somebody has a certain level of skepticism, are you just like, okay, whatever, you're never going to believe in this?
Yeah, I think that's another personal battle I have. By looking at people's charts so regularly, I know that sometimes people are just not meant to have that type of mindset or live with that type of mindset relating to a deeper spiritual understanding or something like that, or that I'm just not the person meant to win them over or meant to explain stuff to them. And that's something I learned because I have a certain way of communicating that isn't for everyone. I'm abstract. I bring multiple ideas together in one sentence instead of hitting them with facts and an organized paragraphs. And that's not everyone's cup of tea. So I always just hit them with recommendations and hints to look further into it. So I always encourage people if they're skeptical, but I have stopped feeling resentful of people's skepticism because I know that this is how studying my astrology has also helped me. Is like, I know that there's certain people that are meant to learn from me. And then people who aren't, I can just encourage them to become more open-minded.
Okay, so it's kind of in the stars whether or not someone is going to be open-minded to astrology or not.
I do feel like it is because there are certain things in our charts, like our Mercury placement. Mercury is the planet of communication and ideas and understanding. So there's things like that that can indicate whether you're going to be more resistant towards some abstract ideas or how you need to receive information. So I think it's definitely written into the stars your basic or like the point of least resistance when it comes to learning new things or what topics will interest you. So I do feel like a lot is written in the stars. Yeah.
Do you think that being underestimated is written in the stars?
I do feel that it is possible. And this is where it kind of falls into the realm of, well, what is your opinion of being underestimated? I think that people's natal charts can indicate where they are going to have trouble and face more resistance with the outer world or authority, or also be conditioned and nurtured sometimes to hold themselves back. A few examples of this would be if you have a retrograde in your chart, where some planets are placed based on your big three, the big three being sun, moon, and rising signs, because you are more than just your sun sign. So anyone who's not super familiar with astrology, you're so much more than just your sun sign or your zodiac sign. There are certain indications in a chart that can help you explain like, oh, you were meant to be underestimated so you can come back stronger if you work with it, if you work with personal growth to overcome those hurdles. Because every great story or hero's journey really speaks to overcoming adversity and the lessons and gifts that we have from those experiences to help other people. So I can actually see that in everyone's chart is like the gifts we can bring to the world, but sometimes those gifts do come so naturally and they don't face as much resistance. So there's definitely indications in a chart of when there's going to be extra struggles, underestimation, or especially like a clear one is issues with authority or parents and stuff like that.
Oh, I love how you've positioned it as kind of like a hero's journey. So if anybody is going through a feeling of resistance right now, they just might be at that point in their life where they're going to feel that, and being able to overcome that, that's when you get to the next stage of the hero's journey. So I like that it's baked in like that. You mentioned a lot of really great terms. So you were talking about retrogrades, natal charts, planets, houses. I know that a lot of people, they think of astrology as just their daily horoscope or their sun sign, but can you talk about some of the other basics that people should pay attention to so they can really start to understand their astrology?
This is what I live for. Okay, so with astrology, like I said, you're more than just your sun sign. A natal chart and your natal placements are a blueprint of when you were born. The time you were born helps, but you don't always need to know the exact time. Even just the date and location can give us an understanding of natural energies you were born with. And that's kind of like the starting point, the blueprint of a building, if you will. And then you can grow. And then there's different activations as the planets move in real time that influence you. So in a natal chart, your basic energy, you have the signs of the zodiac. Those are always in the same order. I could list them, but I think most people are familiar with the zodiac signs. And then there's also houses, and houses represent life areas. I also like to refer to houses as the setting too. Like if we're talking about a movie or something, like astrology would be the planets being specific actors, and actors bring a certain energy to a character. The character they're bringing energy to is what sign they're in at the time. So they act a little bit different depending on what character they're taking on, depending on what zodiac sign the planet is in. They're acting a little differently. And then the house that it falls in your natal chart is the location, like where they're playing out this scene, where this energy is going to show up the most. Then there's also aspects, and aspects are where it gets mathematical, where the planets are talking to each other and communicating and working together, whether that might be through harmonious aspects or more tense aspects and bringing conflict or tension to a situation. So those are like the angles of the planets, or aspects are another big one that I would consider. So you have the signs, which are main zodiac signs, main personalities, those main characters, and then planets representing actors, which are, again, like an additional layer to the energy. For example, Venus being an energy that is based on beauty, and Mars being an energy that's based on motivation or aggression. Just for example, there's so many more things. And then the houses are the most simple to me because it's just location, life areas. We can all kind of relate to that. The natal chart is a really big place to start when you want to work with astrology because you have to get familiar with all of these different things. There's really there's 12 houses, there's 12 zodiac signs, and then 9 major planets. So that's quite a lot for people to wrap their head around. As an astrologer, I can say, then there's so much more than just your natal chart. But those are the basic energies that once you understand what energies you were kind of born with, then you can work to understand how they're meant to play out in your life, what you might need to continue to work through. For example, in natal chart readings, when I'm reading for someone who is, let's say, older than 30, they've already had a significant amount of life experience. So I always ask the question, did you experience this? And sometimes we get into the conversation of, well, when I was younger, I chose to overcome this. And so this is how it's played out. But that's why when I read for younger people, especially around the age of 21, they really, really get a lot of information out of it where they're more willing to recognize what they need to overcome still.
I love the metaphor of the actor, the character, and the set. Can we use my sun as an example?
Yeah. So your sun sign is in Cancer in the 10th house, and someone like a sun sign energy being like an actor, I actually always associate it with Zac Efron. So your sun sign being like joy and performance, Troy Bolton energy, okay?
Oh my God,
But Cancer is like if you took Troy Bolton and put him in his Charlie St. Cloud character, which is a little bit more sensitive and emotional and family oriented. And then you took that character and put it in the Iron Claw, which is career, aggressive. Sorry, Zac Efron is the actor. So I should say Zac Efron's the son, but everyone associates Zac Efron with Troy Bolton. Don't get me wrong.
I just watched High School Musical this weekend.
So Zac Efron as his Charlie St. Cloud character, and that character in the Iron Claw movie, that's the different energies that really astrology is so much more than just the zodiac signs because you have to think about these 3 other things that really add different flavor and energy because there's a specific home energy as well that they belong to. And so understanding where they're at home or where they're their original character, let's say, then moving them or recognizing when they're in a place that is unfamiliar or slightly different to that energy, you can recognize if that energy is going to be off-putting or a failure because you wouldn't want to have Charlie St. Cloud in the Iron Claw because he wasn't built to participate in that setting, in that environment. That being said, in readings, I feel like we have talked about this, your sun sign. Sun sign being your ego, being your main sense of identity, your identifier, being in the 10th house and in Cancer really attributes to your career being a huge part of yourself, being a big thing that you associate with ego or self-worth, your mission in life. But this Cancer placement is really interesting because it does create this juxtaposition because Cancer isn't always so authoritative. It isn't always so business oriented. It acts more off of emotion. So your career journey has taken those ups and downs for you to work closer with the true essence of your sun in the 10th house, which is straight up being your own boss, doing things like this, like your podcast where you're the face of your work. That's a really great example of how to work with the sun in the 10th house is being the face of your work. And in Cancer, being that bringing emotional stories and speaking honestly and authentically, being nurturing to your community and stuff like that is what your sun sign entails. Other people's suns in the 10th house that aren't in Cancer, sometimes it's still being the face of their work, but just being a leader in their HR field or in their office job. And it isn't as here's me, the literal face that you're seeing on your Instagram profile, as with you, Erika, my face. Yeah, 'cause I don't think you realize how often you come up on my feed. So I feel like I see you every day.
I'm so sorry.
No, I love it. I love it.
What I love about that is mostly telling me about me currently, right? And I've seen you post on social media that astrology was never about the future for me. I think a lot of people see astrology as predictive.
Yes.
What can you say about that?
I think most people associate astrology with using it to predict the future. I think actually people often turn to astrology out of moments of anxiety where they need to know if they're going to be okay and if they will achieve this milestone. There was a moment where I was drawn to astrology because I wanted to predict the future, but when I got into it deeper, I realized that's not the way to approach astrology. I learned it really quickly. I really switched my mindset because yes, astrology for predicting the future is what draws people in, but ultimately at the root of it, it's anxiety that gets us to look at these other tools that help us and ultimately help us be okay in the present moment. And so that's why astrology, once as I recognize that, I'm like, I don't want to rely on it to predict the future. I need to be stronger. I need to address what's going on right now because the anxieties that I was feeling was not okay. So that's where I really took astrology to use it as a tool for personal growth and mindfulness. This is also where actually chatting about how being underestimated really influenced me because I believe it was because I didn't want to be underestimated that I felt like I couldn't just rely on astrology for predicting the future. It had to be more. I had to understand it at a deeper level because I didn't want to be underestimated. I didn't want to be just relying on it as a tool. I needed to really understand it because it's not a tool when you rely on it for predicting the future. It's a divination tool, I guess. But switching it around, using it for a tool for personal growth really just changed the game. And that's a really great example of how my own insecurities ended up working for me when I look back on them in hindsight, because my own insecurities made me dig into this topic deeper. And it became my life because I was able to understand it in this way and share my story. So astrology, not being just about the future, it is actually a tool for you to work on yourself in the present moment, for you to understand that baseline energy of what you were given at birth or kind of instilled with, and recognizing how you can work with it in real time, what transits are happening. So the transits are how the planets are moving right now and in present time, and how you're being influenced to change, to shift your energy rather than being kind of stubborn, like, oh, I'm a Scorpio, so I'm meant to be moody. And I can say that because I have a Scorpio moon. So I'm not judging Scorpios. I'm there with you. But being like, oh, this is actually an opportunity for me to adapt and grow out of some moodiness that I had when I was a child, for example. That's where astrology is really so much less about the future, in my perspective, and should be used as a tool for personal growth and mindfulness, and you can use it every day.
Then let's talk about astrology and anxiety. So if you want to use astrology to better understand your anxiety, are there certain things that you need to look at?
Charts of the moment are really good. You can go on astro.com and on the right-hand side, it'll pop up as a chart of the moment. This can intimidate a lot of people because it's like, oh, I got to understand my own chart first. So it does take a little bit of practice, but really simply in the chart of the moment, you can look at where the sun is, where Mercury is, or where the ascendant is, which is usually identified by the acronyms AS or AC or ASC. And any of those three things where the sun, Mercury, and ascendant are, and look at them in comparison to your chart, what life area they're in your chart. And that can help you understand, for example, if they're located in your fourth house, oh, I am meant to focus on home and family things. The fourth house is the life area of home and family, personal values. So maybe you're feeling anxious because you need to call your mom and talk to her about something that you haven't been for a while, or you need to organize your home so then you can reset your energy. Using astrology in that way by checking in with how it's influencing you right now can really just help you understand where to focus your energy and what actionable things you can do to get out of it, instead of thinking about all of the other things that your anxiety is maybe making you think about. It can be very affirmative too and be like, oh yeah, you are worried about your family, so let's just focus on that. Or, you could be worried about something completely opposite and then recognize oh yeah, I haven't paid a lot of attention to the life area these planets are in. I should check a few things off my list and focus on that life area. Additionally, a thing to consider when using astrology for anxiety is it helps us ultimately create life balance, because the houses of astrology are very similar to tools that life coaches and therapists use on life balance. The life areas are all very similar. I think we just add a few that instead of making them like subsections of home, we have some other stuff, or they're all similar. I've seen both. Working with these 12 life areas and recognizing what time of year to bring renewal to them, what time of year to release old energies and resentments in those life areas is a really helpful tool to work throughout the calendar year to maintain life balance and a peace of mind, because I can always look at the calendar and be like, okay, yeah, you know what? This month I'll work on releasing my anxiety around my job, or I know that this is a time of year where career is highlighted for me. The best way for people who know nothing about astrology to do this is to work with the new moons and the full moons. Those are the best gateway into working with astrology in this way of personal growth and mindfulness, because new moons and full moons happen every month. They're 2 weeks apart, so it really kind of is like enough time spaced out for you to work with personal reflections around new moons, which is what you want to bring into your life, and then personal reflections around full moons, which is what you want to release or forgive, and sometimes celebrate milestones on the full moon as well. And they're always going to activate the opposing areas of your chart. So this is where the life balance comes in, where you're always supposed to work with welcoming in new energy in one area while you're releasing old energy in the opposing area. And an example of this, since we were talking about the 10th house of career and growth, the 4th house is opposite to the 10th house, which is home. So when your career's activated, that's also a time where you need to release old energy around home. Sometimes it's cleaning your home out a little bit. How astrology really works is it's consistently activating these opposing areas. So life balance is really something we can achieve.
It makes sense because life is so cyclical, right? We all talk about how we go through different phases of life where sometimes you're in a phase where you're so focused on career. And then you're focused on relationships in another phase, and then in family for another phase. And astrology can help to make sense of that, right? Like, I think it's even helpful if you want to go back and look at old astrology and realize, oh yeah, when I was really stressed about that thing, it's because this part of my chart was activated, or there were planets in this house.
And some people are so unique in the way they experience cycles as well. So using your chart as an example again, your chart is pretty evenly spread out in terms of your big three. Your sun, moon, and rising signs is a great way to work with the cycles.
I'm going to assume moon sign is where the moon is when you're born.
Yes.
What is your rising sign?
So your rising sign is what zodiac sign was like on the horizon when you were born. And this is why location and time are important. And your rising sign being like what was on the horizon, what was closest to your physical body when you entered this world, represents how people see you objectively, and this kind of magical energy, if you will, that is attributed to you and how it relates to your personality just as much as the sun does. I always say that sometimes we are more influenced or aligned to our sun sign and our rising sign at different times. So sometimes I might be more Piscean, which is my rising sign, and then a few months later, I might be more like a Leo, which is my sun sign. Understanding those two energies and what they mean to me is really important in achieving this life balance, and accepting like, okay, am I being more influenced by this placement and what's activating that placement as well? And then your moon sign is, where the moon was when you were born, but this really influences your most private self, your emotional self, that voice in your head. It influences our reactions. So it adds a layer of understanding to our personality too. If people have a specific expectation, for example, me being a Leo, people are like, wow, she's going to be personable and excited to see me. But my moon sign is in Scorpio. And so sometimes I am moody or nervous or anxious and skeptical and self-deprecating. And that's that voice in my head, that secret self that I had to recognize in order for me to have more successful one-on-one interactions with people. So those are your big three. And sometimes people have them throughout their chart in signs that are positively or negatively aligned. So I was saying yours are almost all in air signs. Libra and Aquarius are air signs. Cancer is right beside an air sign, Gemini. So you experience activations every 3 months, like in a 4 month pattern, where some people have them all grouped to one side of their chart. So there could always be this really intense quarter of the year. And then the other half of the year, or 3/4 of the year, they're like, well, what am I doing with my life? What is life? What is the meaning of this? I'm not doing enough. I'm usually so active. It's like, are you usually so active, or are you just used to that being this highlight moments? Other things like how the planets are transiting, there's so much to consider, but even just the fact that your big three might be located to a specific area or creating a strange pattern of activations can really help you understand and accept why certain things are always a little bit harder for you one season or easy for you another, and where you can experience quiet time, if at all. Some people like you, Erika, tend to have a decent amount of stuff going on all the time.
Yes, guilty. Okay, well, if people want to feel more confident then, is there anything they can look at in their astrology to help them figure out how they can do that?
Looking at your ascendant is really helpful because, again, so many people are just used to astrology, meaning their sun signs. And a lot of people stop believing in astrology because they don't associate or identify with their sun sign. So understanding your rising sign is really, really helpful for confidence because it helps you understand how people might see you. So, for example, I was really nervous about talking because, again, I explain things in abstract ways. I bring different ideas together. I talk about things that, like astrology, that not everyone feels is justifiable. Then recognizing that my rising sign is in Pisces, I was able to say, I'm supposed to be this way. Pisces is a sign that is meant to bring people to open their mind, to consider abstract ideas and align more with spirituality. I also have that connotation to Pisces. So I want to also have a side note that when using astrology, create your own meaning to certain signs and add your own connotations. And connotations being, what does that word mean to you? When I say spiritual or abstract, it could mean something different to you. And that's totally okay with how you work with astrology. So knowing my Pisces rising, I was like, oh, I'm going to lean into this more. And the more I leaned into accepting that I was abstract, that I was spiritual, that I was interested in these things that are lesser known or less discussed, I was like, okay, the confidence just was there. So I really encourage people to understand their ascendant and understand the themes that they resonate with when it comes to their ascendant. And maybe those themes are themes that you have been taught to hide a little bit. The next thing for confidence would definitely be your Mercury placement because Mercury is about communication. So this would be Mercury and your third house. They're usually different, but sometimes if you have a Mercury in your third house, you're usually already on top of it. But Mercury and the third house both speak to self-expression and communication. So knowing if they're in your chart in a way affected by like maybe bad placement, there's no bad placements, but more like difficult placements. Like again, if Mercury's retrograde or if your third house is ruled by a sign that isn't as aligned with you or is more difficult for you to understand, by learning it and understanding it, you can really recognize how you have unique communication skills or how your self-expression is meant to be manifested. And third, for confidence, really getting to know your Saturn. Saturn is a placement that is really important when it comes to things we've discussed earlier in this conversation, when it comes to like life patterns and overcoming obstacles and those significant milestones of like personal growth and achievement. Saturn has really intense cycles. So knowing where your Saturn is placed can really help you understand where in life you're meant to kind of have a struggle, face adversity. My Saturn is in my ascendant sign of Pisces. So I have dealt with these issues of self-acceptance and presenting myself. So Saturn in someone's chart and understanding it can help you understand where you do struggle with authority. And I always say, where you struggle with authority but are meant to become your own authority in your life. So your Saturn placement can help you understand like, nope, I am okay to take charge of this life area or emphasize my own perspective in this life area and face authority and kind of overcome it.
Ooh, and it sounds like Saturn can help you to understand where you will face that resistance, like we were talking about at the beginning of the conversation, and where you could potentially be underestimated or have that friction with authority.
Yeah, exactly. So Saturn has one of the most significant cycles that we experience because Saturn is this planet that is actually, it's the last of the inner planets. The inner planets are, the moon, Venus, Mercury, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and then we have the outer planets. The outer planets were discovered after the 1800s, so they're more modern planets. And Saturn is this planet that in Hellenistic astrology, ancient astrology, Saturn was like the final boss, the final god to overcome. And so Saturn represents authority. Saturn represents karma, father time, those kind of archetypes that are so ever present and powerful. And so in our chart, it speaks to where we might battle that final boss, or where, again, we are faced with those karmic experiences that we're meant to learn from and overcome. It has specific cycles where every 7 years, you're faced with one of those tough aspects, a square, which is a 90-degree angle, an opposition, which is a 180, another square, and then a return. So every 7 years, you reach these milestones, and they really line up with the coming of age story of when you're 7, you're more of a functional little kid. When you're 14, you're like a teenager now, and you're going through all of that fun stuff and becoming more of a man or woman or person, or like your hormones are going crazy and you're going through those milestones. That's an opposition. Those even just childhood experiences are speaking to how your structure for the first 7 years was just your family. Then you become increasingly more independent and start making your own definitions to the world. The definition part really comes in around age 14, where you are intelligent enough to start defining yourself and recognizing when any meaning that like your parents put in are wrong or just don't align with your personal preferences. Then when you're 21, this is like the biggest one because this is a final square before the return. And this is where a lot of people around 21, which most commonly is around the end of a first wave of university. Usually people are almost around graduating university. And this is where a lot of people come to like, well, where should I live? What should I do with the rest of my life? Kind of questions. And this is also the age where we are really able to take into consideration how much authority we are giving ourselves. And so it is usually around age 21 to 23 because these Saturn returns have like a 2.5-year influence. This is a really big defining moment in a lot of people's lives where they either let themselves be pushed down a little bit more and go through struggles to please other people or to feel safe rather than taking some challenges on because they feel like they're meant to. And then at age 28 to 30, you have that next 7-year cycle, which is your Saturn return. And this is where you are, I guess, a full-blown adult instead of a young adult. I don't know if we actually have proper age definitions for that, but this is the milestone you go through where you can really recognize yourself as an adult because you're coming up with your own, the Saturn planet representing structure and authority. This is the age where you should or are most aligned to reinvent your sense of authority, to reconstruct your ideals and firmly say, hey, this is actually a belief that I have or a value that I hold dear, and I need to start communicating it to my friends, family, coworkers, community, so they know I am this type of person because now I've had a Saturn cycle, I've grown, and I'm now like my own person. So it's really kind of Saturn cycles really help us relate to the journey of overcoming or growing up and detaching from our original blueprint, if you will, and creating it for ourselves.
I've interviewed so many people on the podcast who have gone through like a major career change, either late 20s, early 30s. I've said all the time, all the cool people have some type of breakdown where they leave their career that they've been doing forever in their early 30s and then figure out what they actually want to do. So that sounds like it's very aligned with the Saturn cycles. If people are going through that moment where they're like, what do I do with my life? What career do I choose? I know you mentioned the 10th house earlier, but is there anything else they should look at in their astrology that could help them figure out what they should be doing?
Well, looking at your Saturn in itself, where you hold authority and like the house it is in, like the life area and sign it's in, can help you understand the energy. But in terms of what you want to do as a vocation or career, you want to look at your chart, look at where the 10th house is, it's a number 10, and whatever sign is associated with your 10th house. Sometimes, depending on chart characterization, it could look like two signs. Just look at both. You want to Google what planet rules this sign. And then you want to find that planet in your chart too, and what house it's in. So for example, for Erika, your 10th house is ruled by Cancer. The ruling planet of Cancer is the moon. And your moon sign is located in the 5th house, which is this house of joy, of creativity. Your podcast is literally called Happy to See Me.
It's written in the stars.
Like, yeah. Like, you know what I mean? These are the things that I don't even know if we can properly quote myself from previous readings that I've done with you. But this is one where I definitely would have said your career is supposed to be about bringing you joy and expressing yourself and about your creativity. What's interesting is I think throughout your entire career, you had creative elements for sure. But then it's just finding the right ones that resonate with you. So we got so much extra information by looking at that second planet. So looking at the 10th house and then wherever the planet that rules that 10th house sign is located can really give you peace of mind to what energies you should be involved in. That's also going to help you at least make sense of why it's okay that you are where you are right now too, or be a clear like, hey, yeah, I need to make this change that I've been thinking of forever. Because also my advice to anyone interested or anyone struggling, you often actually know the answer yourself. And like I said earlier, we turn to astrology and other tools of divination to get answers because we don't want to make the decision ourselves. Astrology can help us through personal growth and mindfulness techniques, and using it in this way with this lens to have the peace of mind to make those decisions ourselves, to recognize like, okay, this is where I'm meant to be, or just using it as a tool to reflect off of. You're having a conversation, if you will, with your natal chart, and you can agree or disagree with it. The choices are ultimately up to you, but it can really help indicate alignment with specific themes that relate to different careers. And more often than not, people are already aligned with them.
Ooh, so it's not supposed to be a guide to tell you exactly what to do, but it could kind of validate, hey, if you're feeling uncomfortable there, it's okay. You're meant to feel uncomfortable there.
Yeah.
Hey, you feel really good there? Good, because that's where you're meant to be. So it could be a tool to just help you understand and validate all the feelings that you're having.
Yeah. And this is where personal philosophy comes in too. Because for me, I use astrology as a form of having a conversation with myself, like I said, and then therefore I'm applying my own personal philosophy on life to things, which is if I don't like something, I have the power to change it. But some astrologers do have the more fatalistic approach to astrology where it's determined, where there are specific answers there. And that is why, in a sense, yes, there are specific answers, but in my personal belief, we still have the agency to change that. Like, because I could say yes, and this is why I say it's a tool for personal growth and mindfulness, because I could say, yes, my ascendant shows that I'm meant to speak a little bit more abstract. And I could have went against that and said, you know what, I'm going to take a Toastmasters course and learn how to speak in a specific way and have very structured sentences and la la la. It could have been that way. I could have done that, but there's different layers to the energy. And I believe we as humans have the agency to, because we're ultimately part of this play. We're ultimately an actor as well. It's like I wish there was an additional metaphor. We're the writers, I don't know, in the metaphor of like actors, characters, and setting. Like, we're also ultimately writing our own story. So we have the agency to write the script there and move things the way that we want to. Because now I'm thinking, I'm like, I really could have done something that really structured the way I present myself, because the planet of structure is in my rising sign. But I chose to do something else. Maybe it'll come up later. Maybe it'll come up in my Saturn square. Who knows? But not how I chose to interpret it. And that's not how other astrologers interpreted it. But yeah, astrology is best applied to your personal philosophy. So when you're coming to astrology, a lot of people come to it as a gateway, like we said, for personal divination and out of this anxiety. When you mature your relationship with astrology, I strongly encourage people to check in with their own life philosophy. Have you defined what that is yet? Because astrology has helped me define my personal philosophy on life. That's where I think, again, some people in our generation are a little lost because they haven't allowed themselves to define their own philosophy. They're just stuck in their generational upbringing philosophy, or wherever they are, they feel like they can't have their own unique outlook. And then applying after practicing astrology a bit more regularly, it's even more powerful when you apply your specific point of view and philosophy. So then you're consistently having conversations with astrology and using it as this tool for personal growth rather than a rule book.
Yeah, it's not a blueprint.
Because I guess astrology isn't a blueprint. Your natal chart, because I've used the word blueprint, your natal chart is a blueprint of like baseline energies. But astrology as a whole is a guide and a tool to work with, not an oracle.
Yeah, because even though you have the blueprint, you don't need to build the house. It's up to you if you want to build the house or not.
Yeah, and you can build it a whole different way if you want to. Because that's the thing, I think that's where astrology in this day and age too, there's so many different perspectives coming into astrology. And that's what I think some people have to recognize. It really is a tool. It really is a practice similar to a yoga practice or working specific areas of your body at the gym or another muscle in your brain, your memory, or whatever else you might be training. Astrology is like that. Like I treat it like a yoga class where it's like, how am I going to interpret things today? What's my point of view going to be like? And that's a mindset that I applied to astrology early on. So I'm one of those astrologers that is more flexible and abstract, like my Pisces rising says, where there's really these endless possibilities to using astrology, but there is a clear formula of how to get to an interpretation or an idea through astrology, which is what I've discussed of locating where a planet is. I say activating your chart. So like if the sun right now is in your third house, then it's activating communication or something right now. So that's an area to look at. And those are little formulas that can help direct you to clarity, that can help you understand where to focus on and then achieve that greater understanding and life balance that I was talking about.
Can you share with the listeners something about my astrology, either where you think I would have ease in life, or even what areas of my life will come into focus this year or next year?
So I looked ahead a little bit. So I know specifically that this year, so a heads up to everyone, this year Mercury only retrogrades in fire signs in 2025. So we'll get a Mercury retrograde in Leo, then a few months later in Sagittarius, then in Aries. And for you, Erika, this influences your house of community and friendships, then your house of communication and siblings, and then your relationships and romance. So I'm like, oh boy, what's going to happen in romance? Because I love the juice.
Yeah.
But what's significant is all of your fire sign houses have to do with relationships and interacting with people and sharing ideas, communicating, creating partnerships. The seventh house activation is also like, could you have created significant business partnerships as well by the time the year is over? So in your chart, there's this really lovely experience of, okay, consistently things shifting and you consistently adapting to a lot of relationships and like mental energy and creative energy. So this is going to be a super creative year for you. I do want to mention that I used my favorite perfection technique. And this is another thing that I didn't really talk about a whole lot, but this is just my favorite timing technique that is a little bit more simple than other things I've talked about. People can Google perfection calculator and then they just put in their birth time and it'll pop up. But it just assigns you a specific house to focus on for the year, for the month. You can get down to the day. But for your year this year, since your birthday, so it starts on your birthday. So because your birthday is in July, it's kind of like half and half with the calendar year too. So you're already experiencing halfway through a second house perfection month or perfection year, sorry. So this year is about like money, finances, material items. And when did you start your lovely fashion goals of like only buying 15 items? Was that your birthday or was it 2024?
2024.
Okay, yeah. So I was like, this is interesting that this is also aligned with your perfection year. But so that kind of stuff is going to come to an end and wrap up by your birthday. So you still have like 6-7 months of experiencing some rounding out this journey of new financial or material item stuff. So like buying more things for your environment, or also like figuring out your personal values as well. So this is a great example to show how life areas are both material, but then also a little bit philosophical and psychological, because we talk about material items and money, but also personal values with the second house. Then you move into a third house year on your birthday. And so that's where there is an extra layer of significance around communication and self-expression that you're going to experience in 2025. So super fun year.
Can't wait.
Great year for the podcast, maybe?
Ooh, I hope so. Fingers crossed. I mean, we love the podcast. We love everyone who tunes in, and also love you for being a guest on the show today and sharing all of your wisdom with everybody. If people are interested in you and your services and they want to follow you, where can they do that?
I am basically only on Instagram because I'm old now and I don't get TikTok.
I'm older than you, Sarah.
I know,
I get
but like,
I understand.
This is, right? Like, this is crazy. So on Instagram, Sarah Goldsmith Astro is my handle, and I have everything there, or sarahgoldsmithastrology.com. You can fill out a contact form and we can chat about any of your astrology questions.
Oh my gosh, Sarah, thank you so much. I've been seeing you for years and I have learned new things about my astrology in this chat. Thank you so much.
Yay, that makes me so happy.
Thank you, Sarah, for so many amazing insights. And if you know an astrology fan, make sure you share this episode with them. Now, I love to end each episode by answering a listener question. And someone recently asked me, what is your favorite thing you bought this year? So if you don't know, on social media, I made a goal to only buy 15 fashion things. I usually love shopping. I have a closet full of clothes. So I wanted to be intentional by only buying 15 things, and I've been sharing them online. So when I think back to the things that I have bought so far, that I have posted so far, the item that I surprisingly have gotten a lot of use out of that I really love is my lime green cropped bell-sleeved blazer. I know, when you describe all of those things, it does not sound like a daily wardrobe staple, right? But I have gotten so much use out of this blazer. And this was a blazer I bought at a consignment store. My friend saw it at the store and she's like, you should try this on. And I put it on and it just fit me like a glove. And I've been able to wear this thing at corporate events when I've been doing speeches. I've been able to wear it casually. I've been able to wear it to the Charlie XCX concert. Let's be real. I think that the reason why a lime green blazer has gotten so much mileage this year is because of Brad. But this is something that, again, not a neutral, a very distinct shape. You wouldn't think that it's a wardrobe staple that you could wear in many instances, but it's been something I've worn a lot. And I think it's something that is going to continue to get a lot of mileage in my closet. And I hope that this is a reminder that when you shop for things that are not necessarily on trend, but you buy them because they feel so good to you and you just love the way they look and they suit your own personal taste, I think you'll be able to wear them in a surprisingly many number of instances. So when you're shopping, shop for whatever is cool to you. So thank you so much to the listener who asked me that question. I love getting your questions, so feel free to DM me either personally on Instagram or at the podcast Instagram. The podcast is on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Happy to See Me Pod. And if you haven't already, I would love if you could subscribe, rate, and review the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much for spending a bit of time with me this week, and I will be happy to see you next Monday.